Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Robert O'Brien from the Maine Development Foundation. I work on a project called For Maine, or Forest Opportunity Roadmap. Today we're joined by the Governance Project. I'll allow them to introduce their organization in just a moment, but we're joined by Colin Higgins and Yvonne Durbin, both of whom are going to introduce a new product called Ground Up, which is an online pro forma demo that's available to people for free, funded by the MasterCard Foundation. This project is going to allow folks to test out a property, commercial or residential, to see whether or not it would produce a profit once it's developed. I will now turn over to them to give better introductions about both their organization and their project. And I will be facilitating Q&A after they're done with the demonstration.
Great, thanks, Rob, and thank you for letting us speak to you all today. I first got to know Rob when we were doing some work up in, oh my gosh, the Orono area around opportunity zones and inclusive growth, which is sort of what the Governance Project has worked on for the last couple of years. I come to the Governance Project with a background sort of in policy around economic development, and our organization really focuses on three areas of driving inclusive growth. We convene people and educate people, and sort of put on various events and try and bring stakeholders together in the same room. We work on white papers and best practices and toolkits and your sort of standard think tanky stuff. And then the third area we work on is technical assistance and pro bono technical assistance. And that's really driven by my colleague, Yvonne, who I will pass it over to introduce herself. And then we'll talk a bit about Ground Up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne. I've been with the Governance Project for just over a year now. And as Colin mentioned, I drive a lot of our technical work. So that used to look like was working one-on-one with cities to build financial models around opportunity zone projects. And what it will look like today is the backbone of the financial model we're going to show you and talk through that'll hopefully be useful to you in modeling out some real estate projects that you're interested in seeing in your communities.
Great, so just to provide a quick introduction of what Ground Up is, and Rob kind of gave a teaser of it. It's a web-based model we've developed that is kind of like TurboTax, but for community development. So you can put in a bit of information, and the numbers it spits out at the end show you, is this project financially viable, and what does an investor see, and more importantly, how can you change the different layers of financing within the model to make it something that private capital may be interested in. We've designed this tool so it's relevant for a few different audiences, and I know there are people from different backgrounds on this call. We've really designed it first and foremost with folks in municipal development offices, so development finance officials, economic developers, city managers, who really manage the public finances and are trying to build better futures for their communities. The other group we've really designed it for is people who are first-time or small developers who are looking to see, sort of quick yes or no decision. Is this project something worth pursuing? And how do I change this project to make it something that is viable? At the end of the day, we really see the tool as something to be used in the pre-development process, right? Ultimately, people have their own spreadsheets and models that they use, and projects that advance through development will inevitably use more complex models than the one we've designed. This is really designed to be sort of a go, no-go decision. And if it's no-go, what are the other options out there? How do we make this work? Or is this something that perhaps isn't suited for private capital, and we need to look at philanthropic and other public sources of money to try and make this project something we really want for the community? At the end of the day, a lot of the work we were seeing, or a lot of the projects we were seeing through our work with opportunity zones really came down to the community having a laundry list of things they wanted to get done, but not necessarily being certain how to prioritize those things along the lines of what private money may be interested in. And so, we designed to build a tool to really try and help fill that gap and help communities interact and liaise with developers sort of on more even footing and with a hard set of numbers in front of them. As Rob mentioned, this tool is free. We were funded by the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth to build it, and we're really motivated by filling this gap and trying to get it into as many hands as possible, especially looking forward over the next 6 months to a year as we move into hopefully a period of economic recovery, and there will be money moving for some type of real estate and inclusive growth developments. We really want to put local governments and put communities in the driver's seat of that to make sure they're moving the projects they want to see forward. The tool will be live in a few weeks, and we'll have an early access version live probably in 2 to 3 weeks or so. And so if you're interested in signing up, either before you see the demo, if you're really excited about this, or after you see the demo and you're excited about it, I'll put a link in the chat where you can sign up, and we'll notify you when the model is live, and we'd love to get questions and feedback along the way. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Yvonne, who will walk you through what the model looks like and what it may look like from your standpoint as you're looking at different projects to model out.
Colin, quick question before we pass it over. When the project is finally complete in its final version and it goes live, what do you expect access to look like? Will it just simply live live on a website that anyone can go to, or will it be by permission or invitation, or what do you expect access to look like?
It will be on a website that anyone can go to. And Yvonne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it will just be on groundupmodel.org, the site that I am going to share with our sort of launch page. Anyone can go to it, and once you're there, you can create an account. And once you create an account, you create projects within your account, and that's really how you model out and play around with the different finances for the project. So it's a web link that anyone can use. But if you want sort of early access and you want to sort of be on a list where we sort of go through and work out, there will inevitably be, because it's a web-based model and we're sort of putting something new out into the world, there will be a few bumps along the way. And so if you want to be part of that process of really refining the model so it meets your needs, you can sign up early.
Great. Well, I will share my screen so that hopefully everyone will be able to see the demo. Rob, can you see it? Yes, great. Okay, yeah, so it's on groundupmodel.org, and it is going to be embedded in a number of other websites within the ecosystem, so it should be really easy to get to. And you can see here, this is kind of what the landing page will look like. So what I'll do today is run through the basics of what we're trying to achieve with this and show you what the website looks like. And then I'll also go through a little bit of a sample project to show you kind of the data that goes in behind. And I'll stop partway through, Rob, and see if you've collected any questions before barreling through the whole demo as well. So as Colin mentioned, we're not live quite yet. So today what I'm going to show you is sort of a pre-filled version of it, so you can get an idea of what it's going to look like when you're actually using it. So you'll create an account, and then you'll come to this, which is the projects page. So this is where you'll create new projects and see everything on your dashboard. And everything that you create behind your login is yours. So this won't be public to anybody else other than people that you would choose to share it with. So before I go fully into the model, I want to highlight a couple things on this landing page. So first of all, you'll see that on each of my sample projects here, I have a duplicate function. And this is one of the things that we're really excited about. So we know that a lot of people working in community and economic development have great ideas. They made prospectuses for opportunity zones, have thought about different sites that they want to see things built on, but haven't been able to get the hard numbers around those projects, aren't really sure where to go from there. And so what we provide here is the ability for you to do a very easy sensitivity analysis. So you'll go all the way through, create your project, put in your best assumption numbers, and come out with real numbers at the end around how much the project might cost, what are potential returns for investors, what might the financing look like. And then it's really simple for you to iterate on that. You don't have to go all the way through again. You can duplicate the project, change one thing, and then compare side by side. So if you want to say to yourself, oh, I wonder what would it look like if I were able to get that tax incentive filled in. Just add that, test it, see how different it looks. Or what if I were able to get the grant from the Family Foundation? What if I were able to decrease rent a little bit on my residential units? And so what we hope is that the ability to do that really easily will help you compare and figure out really where you want to go. The other thing that I'll highlight, on the top, we have a resources tab and a blog tab. And there are kind of two key components of this model for us. One is the model, and we are providing a 10-year financial pro forma at the end, but the other is really an educational component. So we know that the terminology throughout this and a lot of what you'll see might be new depending on what your background is. And so we aim to provide a lot in the way of resources explaining the financing particularly, and also tax incentives, what are opportunity zones, and really a full suite of information that'll help you understand what it is that you're going through if you need that extra bit. If not, then the financial model is there for you. So I'll jump into showing you our model. So you can see on the left-hand side all the tabs that you would run through in order to start out and see a project. And at the top of each section, we'll always tell you what are we going to be asking you about, so you can kind of prepare yourself and the data. When we start out with basics, what is the project? Where is it? How big is the site? And for today, you'll see it filled in, but normally it was that grayed out version that I just showed. You get to this screen here where you choose what type of project you're doing. And we've built this so that there are three main project types: residential, commercial, and office. And you can select any or all of them. So we really had mixed use development in mind when we were constructing this. So you're able to choose if you want residential and commercial, so you might mix them both in the development, and then our model will only take you to the places you need to go, so it won't show you, you only want to do a residential build, you won't have to look at anything else. So for today, I'm going to run through the residential section to give you guys an idea of what the data is that we'll be going through, what it looks like. But as you can imagine, the commercial and office will be quite similar to this.
Yvonne,
Yes.
are you implying that you can actually select more than one if you have a mixed use project?
Yes, so you'll click on the boxes. So if you click, yeah, you can click all three of them, and then you'll be doing a build that has all three of those components. If you only select residential, it'll only take you to residential.
Great. And the demo project is just using one track.
So the demo project is actually using both residential and commercial. So you can see I've come through, and now the office tab is hidden here on the left. So we're doing residential and commercial, but just for the purpose of not showing too many slides today, I'll show you the residential section.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So you can see here at the top in the residential section, and it will be similar in commercial and office, there are these 6 tabs that you're going to go through, and we will be walking you through. So each section starts out with you thinking about, am I doing new construction? Am I renovating? Or am I just taking over an existing building? And again, you'll be able to choose all of these if you have a site that has many different types of components on it. And the thing that I want to highlight here as well is we have our little mascot friend, Gary the groundhog. So if you guys can think back to the Microsoft paperclip, he's kind of the same not generation, he's the next generation of that. And so one of the things that we've aimed to do throughout is every single piece of financial terminology will have a definition, and everywhere you're inputting data, we will provide you with a range of what's reasonable to kind of anchor your assumptions and resources so you can really know where to go to find good numbers. So from what we've built here, we don't provide you with a lot of numbers. Instead, we try to lead you to the best hyperlocal data that you can get so that your project makes sense actually in the context of where you live. So we have built this to be a nationally functional tool. So we needed it to work from rural Maine to LA, basically. So,
Yvonne, can I pause for just another second? I have a question from Q&A. Colin, when you provided this demo for me earlier this summer, we got into the question of what about industrial and manufacturing projects? You had an answer for that then. I wonder if either one of you could speak to that now.
Sure. So the basic thing here is that we have those three main sections: residential, commercial, and office. And our thinking was really that most manufacturing would fit well into the commercial section. And the reason is that we've kind of created the commercial section to be a catch-all that's quite simple. You're going to charge rent and you're going to operate a building. So everything that goes into maintenance and utilities and all that is built in. And Colin mentioned it before, but really what we see this doing is being the first thing you do to figure out, does my site work? Could this possibly work out? How much rent can I get from my building? And so it's not highly complex. And at the time at which you've decided exactly who the company is that's going to come in and rent from you and what they're going to manufacture, and you have investors who are interested, probably you do need a more complex model in order to move forward at that point. So what we've done is create something that's simple enough for you to get to some core assumptions that'll help you get the right people to the table, ask the right questions, know what the ballpark numbers are so that you know kind of where you're going. So that's a long-winded answer to that. The manufacturing would fall well into the commercial category.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so I'll show you also moving forward in residential, we break it down by, you can just decide what kind of units you're going to have in your building, how large the units are, and the breakdown of those units. And you can see on this page that there's all this white space on the right, and that's one of the things that we are working through now in order to be live, is that there will be, again, Gary the groundhog, lots of tips here, pointers. How do you figure out, what's a reasonable size for an apartment in your area? Who do you talk to and where do you go for that? So that's one of the things we're still working on that'll hopefully be very useful once we're live. And I'll also point out at the bottom of every page, we have an outputs section. So basically throughout, as you're changing the numbers above, you'll see how everything is calculated. This becomes more important as it gets more complex, but I wanted to highlight it here. Basically, we don't want there to be any kind of secret sauce behind this. It is supposed to be very straightforward, help you understand what it is that you're doing and how the changes you make impact the numbers that are coming out. So we've based rent for the residential part on area median income. And so basically our thinking was, we built this tool, it can be quite broad. So you can build whatever you want to using it, but our main goal here is hopefully to promote socially impactful projects. And so we've made it very easy for you to build affordable and workforce housing using this tool, because we provide all the information around it. We explain the difference between workforce and affordable housing and what a rent burden is. And we give you the ability to charge two different rents, the same residential, so you can have some that's more subsidized and some that is market rate if you choose to do it that way, but you don't have to. So there are 3 more tabs in residential that go into more detailed operating and revenue assumptions. So thinking about things like, you know, what do you pay the person who sits at the front desk of your building if you have such a person, janitorial functions and utilities and maintenance and repairs and insurance. So all of that comes through, and then we also set you up for growth assumptions. So I didn't mention at the top, but we've structured these projects so that they go on for 10 years. And the basic reasoning for that was we have opportunity zones on the brain, although you don't need to be in an opportunity zone to use this model. Basically, a lot of investors that you might be courting on the equity side are probably interested in around that period of hold anyway, and will need to exit the investment to get their money back. And that's sort of why we've structured it in that way as well, so we can provide you with 10 years worth of financial data at the end. So over the course of the project, you can also have growth assumptions around, you know, what does the occupancy rate look like for your units, and does rent change over time? Do you think your expenses are going to go up over time? So we allow for all of that as well. So the commercial and office sections are quite similar to this. I want to go into more detail on the taxes and project finances part, because I think that that's really where we think our value add is in helping people figure out how to finance and pay for these types of projects. But Rob, are there any other questions before I do that?
I don't have any. I would just invite any participants, if you have questions during the presentation, type them into the Q&A section, which I'm monitoring, and then I'll impose those into the presentation.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to highlight, after you go through and figure out what do you want to build, then we start to think about how are you going to pay for it, what type of public financing needs to come in, what type of private financing. And so we have this section on taxes and tax credits. So of course here you can make it relevant to your local context. And then on the next page, we allow for tax credits to come into the project in a number of different ways. So as many of you, I'm sure know, you might be courting various tax credits if you're looking at affordable housing, or if you're looking at even retail space with storefronts on the sidewalk. Like there are quite a lot of options across the country for public financing for certain types of projects, and a lot of the socially impactful ones do bring those in. So on our model, you can bring them in at the beginning of the project on an annual basis, or upon sale at the end of the project. And we've made this quite general so that any of the hundreds of different ways in which these work across the country can be included. But we will also be providing resources on the side to explain how you might model a couple of the more common ones that we've seen, like new markets, tax credits, and like LIHTC, for example. So that's kind of the start to, do you look at public financing or not? And we also would encourage you, when you start out, to first probably click no and try to see how the project goes on without it. And then you can come back and see how much do you really need. One of the things that we've learned through working with communities is that often an investor or developer will approach City Hall and say, I need X dollars of tax credits for this project to work. And City Hall doesn't have a great way of testing that assumption. So we want you guys to be able to play with the numbers and really be able to negotiate for yourselves and your projects, and use the least amount of public financing that you need to get the projects that you want.
Yvonne, I don't know where this fits in, but I'm sure a common question will be, what about, this model can't possibly build in every single state's tax credits or regional tax credits. I wonder, what a workaround might be for those, whether it's a placeholder or some other way in order to incorporate that.
Yeah, so that's kind of why we built it in this way, so that it doesn't incorporate any specific credits, but instead we'll direct you to looking up what the credits are in your area and how they work, and explain a few examples, and then you'll be able to use our model to input whichever ones you have. So you can bring them in on just a dollar amount basis or per square foot amount, and so because of that, you should be able to model I'm sorry. You should be able to model any of those various state level credits that exist, just because of the flexibility that we've built in here.
And I'll just quickly add, right? Like from a high level, we sort of went at it as, you know, most tax credits are designed in a couple of different ways, right? You're either the sort of cash right up front in order to finance the project, or they're annually apportioned. You know, and we sort of said, right, like most state or local tax credits fall within those buckets. And so like, as you're looking them up, you know, and we've provided examples of, right, new markets, which, as I'm sure many know on this call, is a bit more complicated than that, but we've sort of walked through sort of an example of how you might enter that in into this, just to give you an example of how you might think through some of the local structures of your tax credits within this, again, like very generalized model, but generalized so you can be really locally specific.
Great. Yeah, so I'll now jump in and show you the rest of the kind of core project finances part of this. So you figured out what you want to build and what potential tax credits might come in. And then we look at the rest of your costs. So construction costs, how difficult is it to build on this site? And then the per square foot cost of the different construction types that you've chosen. So hard costs and then soft costs, which are percentage based below. And again, there will be quite a lot in the way of information on this page to direct you to how to fill this out. From here, we go to the funding sources. So we start our model looking at debt. And so you can see, depending on what you put in this box, it'll fill your project financing bar to that amount. So you'll see how much you will have left to fill. And we've really structured this in such a way where you can choose to have as little or as much debt as you think is reasonable, and we'll show you whether or not your choices will be possible in terms of you covering your debt service with the cash flow that you have. And we've also structured it so that you can have a construction loan that converts to permanent financing if you choose to do that. So after you choose debt, you get taken to this page, which walks you through the rest of your project finances. And this bar that I'm showing here, this is a completed project. So it won't look exactly like this when you start out, but you can see the debt and the tax credits coming through and everything in between. So basically from our work, we've seen a lot of the socially impactful projects really do require complex capital stacks. And we wanted to give people the ability to work through those in a way that was super accessible, because it can be, of course, extremely complicated, and there are all these complex waterfall structures you might want to build in eventually when you start working with the developer and investors. But until you get there, we've built this to help you think through who you should be going after for funding and how much you need in each category to make this work. So you can have equity come in from just market rate equity or opportunity zone equity. Your developer can bring in separate equity, and then we also allow for so philanthropic or grant dollars that are going to come in, and a couple different types of social impact capital. So if you were lucky enough to find a family foundation that wanted to provide you equity financing but accept a quite low rate of return, you're able to model that out here as well. And you can see this part isn't finished yet, but again, the explanations will be there on the benefits and drawbacks of the different types of capital, and how this all works. So at the bottom, you'll see a breakdown by dollar amount and by percentage, given what you've chosen above. So final couple 2 pages.
Yvonne, could I jump in with a question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first question is around mixed use. This model, if I have a mixed use building, let's say it's a Main Street building with retail on the first floor and apartments above, this model will break it down by square footage and percentages, right? Is that how you handle it?
Yes, exactly. So it won't, it doesn't create a pretty picture that shows you like your ground floor versus your top floors. Instead, it will be square footage based. So you'll sort of need to keep that picture in your mind yourself.
Great. And the second part of the question is, when you covered construction costs, it doesn't break it out, or this model doesn't break out the types of construction. So again, if I had a Main Street building and I needed an elevator or I needed sprinklers or those sorts of things, we don't break out the specific line items for those construction costs. A user would have to know the overall cost of construction for the building, or is there a line item for, say, life safety and or ADA or anything like that?
So we don't have those line items. What I will say is that generally in the space, what we've seen is a per square foot construction cost for residential or for commercial, for example. And you're right that that number changes based on, is it 3 stories, you don't need an elevator, or is it 6 and you do? But we found that breaking that out tends to get to a more sort of a higher level of granularity that you don't need here. And that the estimates, if you were to speak to a local developer about what they do, they'd be able to tell you, it's usually around $210 a square foot for my residential builds, and then go from there. And so that's really the level of granularity we're getting at in terms of getting this kind of back of the envelope plus ready for people to figure out generally what's it going to cost them to do the project and how much money do they need to fill the gap. You're right. So we don't go into that level of granularity, and we actually haven't in any of our models when we've done one-on-one technical assistance either.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
Yeah, so we looked at the different financing types. We have a couple more complex questions around equity that I won't get into a lot today. We also then go into your exit assumptions. So as I mentioned before, it is a 10-year project concept. And so the thought here is that you will eventually need to value the project at least at the end of the 10 years so that some of your investors can exit if they choose to. And so we've built it out with this exit cap rate, which is quite important in terms of the outcomes of a model. And from here, that's basically what you go through in terms of inputs and inputting the numbers. So after that, you'll see, and you'll see this actually after all of the main sections, a summary of what you've done. So you can kind of keep track of it and see a snapshot along the way. And then we show you results. So we show you a breakdown of returns. And as you can see, this is not a great project. And we choose to demo this one on purpose because we really think that quite a lot of these projects first start out looking this way. And then what we will do is sort of guide you towards what are the levers you should pull and try to play with to see if this project can improve and will be attractive to private investors, or is it not likely to attract private capital and you need to go about thinking about this in a slightly different way with more public financing and really know where to go and who to talk to. So that's why we model this bad looking project. So in addition to showing that and the high level cost and financing numbers, we also produce a 1-page PDF that'll show you kind of the key stats about the project. It'll talk to you about the key costs and the key financing numbers, overall project numbers. And then we also show you 10 years worth of project financials. And so each of these sections are expandable. So you can click in and you can scroll across for 10 years, see the cash flow in each of these sections if you really want to deeply understand what's going into the return numbers that you're seeing in the project cost numbers. And so that's kind of what we've built so far. As I mentioned, a lot of what we're still working on is the companion resources. So they'll be on every page with every input to explain and help along the way. And we are going to be live with this in just a couple of weeks at this point, and we really hope that people will be interested in testing out some of the ideas that they have and seeing whether the ideas they have are translating to paper and who they should be bringing to the table to discuss these projects with.
Great. Yvonne, I wanted to revisit, as you scroll down the sort of printout, a summary that you have right there. From my understanding, this is sort of the ability for someone to test their project digitally on the back of an envelope, but to, once they have all their assumptions in place, to be able to print this out or digitally have this snapshot of their project, to be able to take it to a financing professional to test their assumptions after that. And this is a great summary, all captured in a pretty format, to be able to bring that and articulate to someone, here's what I was thinking for my project, here are my assumption numbers, and do these hold water?
Yes, so that's really what we hope it will be used for. Less a financing professional and more an investor who might be interested in the projects that you have. So yeah, somebody who comes and says, I really want to invest in opportunity zones in your town, what do you have? And you can show them this for any of the projects that you've run through ground up, and kind of figure out with them whether or not it looks on the front as it might be interesting. And also, we think it will also be useful to figure out which projects you should put your time into. So if you are considering hiring outside financial or consulting help, figuring out really where they should direct your resources so you don't have to hire as many of those people for as long, but instead you're able to really direct them to the projects that, based on these high level numbers, look more realistic and like they might work out best.
That's great. And so I can also envision that if you have an account here and have several projects that you've already run through this process, if someone were to come to you and say, hey, I'm looking for projects right now, you could actually go to your login page and see several projects and print these out on demand
Yes.
to talk to various investors.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. And one piece of functionality that won't be ready in 2 weeks when we launch, but will be ready shortly thereafter, is a sort of share function, so that if somebody else has an account, you can share the project with them and they can see the same numbers and work on it with you if you choose to do that. So that's a coming soon feature.
That's great. Several of our towns in Maine do have housing trusts where properties that become delinquent over time, the town may assume them in order to clean the title and some other functions to get them ready for the private sector again. So it's possible that this product could be used to sort of test out the viability of those real estate buildings on the private sector when they're ready to be turned over. And this would be a great place to sort of capture those projects to turn them over for people who are ready to flip them after they've been cleaned up.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic use case for it.
Yeah, and in general, right, we're really envisioning this as something that just can kind of enhance the existing development process, right? To the extent there's pipeline that exists that you're looking to kind of put some hard numbers around. So, you know, in the event that you have investors coming to you, in the event that there's, you know, federal funding that opens up for something, you know, within a set of policy priorities, you can sort of slot that in and say, like, all right, you know, we're here to go. We have some hard numbers. Let's try and bring some private capital to this and really drive the project forward. Or, just like, standard run of the mill, you have your normal process and you just want to have go and no go decisions on it. It's kind of something that fits into what we really see it as fitting into the everyday process of you have to liaise with people with hard numbers and you don't necessarily have time to build out really complicated models behind it.
Great. I have two questions on Q&A. One is pricing, and we've always talked about this product being available for free. Do you see the future of this product always being available free, or do you see something pricing structure in the future?
Yeah, so our vision for this right now is it's going to be free for municipalities, for developers, for folks who are on the ground and really trying to drive forward community development projects, right? We want it to be free for them because, we've seen oftentimes this is a barrier where projects fall flat, and we don't want to create additional barriers to people using this tool. We also have, and we've gotten this question a few times, so I just want to sort of anticipate it. And we've gotten questions about, do we plan on sharing the data? Do we plan on monetizing the data? And that is not our intent with this either. We really, respect and value people's privacy with this. To the extent, we'll use the data, it will be sort of aggregated into like broader trends for, right? Like we do have this sort of think tank type arm and type approach, and it will really inform that to the extent, but, we have to get a lot of people using it before we can do that. Just to reiterate, right, we are a nonprofit, and our model is really based on seeking grant funding and, to the extent there are people who are consultants and interested in this, directing people to them. But we are really here and funded by a grant to build this tool and funded on grants. And so the tool is free. And I just wanted to be sort of transparent with our thinking about that for the folks on this call.
That's great. I appreciate that, Colin, because when I saw your presentation earlier, that was one question that came up, was the sort of privacy of the information that was being entered. So I appreciate that you clarified that. I also have another question over Q&A, which is whether or not towns or economic development entities could either link to this or host this on their website because of how many people come to them with very soft numbers, which are not helpful, which are not fully developed and therefore not helpful at the time that they're contacting some of these towns, and to be able to direct them to this product immediately up front for them to at least have done a cursory run through of their project would be extremely helpful. So I wonder how shareable is this product with some of those nonprofit and economic development entities?
So we would be super happy for people to link to this, especially to the extent that they're nonprofits or government entities. We're happy to have our link listed on the resources page. We've had a number of questions about like embedding the tool more formally, so you can use it from other pages. And that's something that we need to figure out kind of, again, post-launch, because not the first priority is getting this out the door and functioning, but is definitely a conversation that we'd be happy to have in a few weeks' time in more detail. But the short answer is yes, happy to have it linked to, happy to have a blurb about it that we can send to you to put on a web page and have people directed in that way.
Great. There was more nuance to that question I just asked, which I thought was really good. Oftentimes, I'm hearing from the Q&A, towns are approached by someone who wants to have a verbal conversation about their project. So they come, they want to sit down with a town, and they want to sort of walk through the numbers verbally. This questioner was asking whether or not there might be either a printout or some way for a town to sort of have these questions of these fields printable so they can sit down and talk about them verbally with a potential client.
So right now, the PDF one-pager is really what we envisioned for that. It doesn't have all of the numbers on it. But it does have quite a lot in the way of the high level that you'd want for a first conversation to talk through. I needed to confirm this because I know I asked our developer partners for it. And I think that it's coming, that each of those summary pages at the end of each section that tells you what you've done and the numbers that you put in be accessible at the end as well. So on the page I'm showing now in terms of the results, that you'll see them all again, so that you basically can review everything you've done at the end once again and print it out from this page. So that is a priority, and I think it'll be ready in the next 2-3 weeks when we launch, but if it's not, it'll be ready shortly thereafter as well.
And the other thing I want to sort of highlight there, because I think it's a really important question in terms of, someone wants to have a verbal conversation and you want to be prepared and have, really targeted questions to ask them, right? Because if they want to have a verbal conversation, presumably they're asking for some type of either public support or public resources. And what we really want to do with this tool is provide a guide of the types of questions you should be asking, right? All the input fields are questions that we're asking you in order to model out a project, but they're also questions that, you should be asking if you're sitting down and having this conversation around soft numbers. And, especially the summary pages at the end of the fields that Yvonne mentioned, right? Those are the really key inputs that often determine the sort of what the cash flow of a project is. And we will, in our resources and blog section have, what are the big levers that you can pull on to change the numbers of a project, and just to get you thinking around what are the real sort of pointed questions you can ask to find out, what the fundamentals of the project are. And so I really appreciate that question because it's getting at sort of the underlying problem and underlying question we're trying to answer with this.
Great. Colin and Yvonne, do you envision, we have 18 participants today who are taking a first glance at this. They haven't been able to fiddle around with it on their own. When this goes live or when you're in the alpha stage of releasing it, do you envision a proper training being available or some more sophisticated walkthrough that people could get a second glance at it so it's more solidified in their minds?
So the short answer is not yet. Right now, because we're headed into this kind of soft launch part of our rollout, what we're really focused on is providing really good resources and information throughout the model. So our goal is that people can use this for the first time on their own and have all of their questions answered within the model, that they'll see on the screen answers to anything that they could think of. And we're very willing to add to those resources along the way to make that a reality if it's for some reason not at the outset. So that's really our goal at the outset. From there, we'll see whether we are able to produce some kind of video training or something like that. We will definitely be hosting more webinars along the way to get people interested with more demos and walkthroughs. And we'll have a question function that submits a question to us, but we're optimistic anyway that we'll have quite a lot of users and therefore won't have the capacity to sit down with people and go in detail through their whole project with them, for example, but we'll be able to answer very targeted questions in that way. So a very long-winded way of saying we'll see how it goes, but we really hope that what we provide here is kind of one-stop shop. You won't have a lot of questions. At the end, it's possible, and we're preparing now for the case where you get to the end, you think you have a great project and you aren't sure what to do with it, and then we'll be recommending kind of next steps, who should you talk to at that point, which likely won't be ourselves since we are such a small team. And that's the only part of this where, there probably are some consultant type people that we might recommend that could help there. And if you chose to move on to that, then those people might want to charge you a fee, but never within the context of our own model. So that's probably where we'll be headed in terms of how to help people move on with this once they've worked through it. But we'll keep you up to date as resources change as well.
Terrific. I would like to open this up for participants. If you'd like to ask a question, at the bottom of your screen, there's an ability to click raise your hand. At that time, I would be happy to unmute you and allow you to ask a question verbally if you have questions or comments at this time. And we have Peggy Daigle from East Millinocket. Peggy, go ahead. Just a moment, Peggy. You are muted, Peggy, just a moment. Sorry, having technical difficulties. It's not responding by mute.
Did that work?
Yes, you're here. Go ahead, Peggy. Thank you.
I got the button is what I got. This is very interesting. I really like this model. I think this is going to help us out with a number of things that we're doing in East Millinocket. However, we are right now focused heavily on the industrial side of things. And so as you build out your model, I would be willing to share with you some of the things that we're dealing with that might, help in terms of additional areas. Because, for instance, let me give you this. If we allow, say, a 50-acre development on this site that we're acquiring, we also have to consider the build-out area, which will be the building that this developer will use. We also have to consider parking, access, lay-down area of raw materials, as well as the shipping area. So each one is probably going to have a different rate for leasing, because everything that we do is going to be a lease model. So, I'm scratching my head. For instance, we have a warehouse, but right next to it, we have a train shed that allows for 20 railroad cars. One developer only needs 2 of the rail lines, which is 8 cars. And so, which includes loading docks and storage of forklifts and things like that for loading and unloading. So that's going to be a different rate than the area in which they're using for storage of materials for shipping. So just so you know, this is kind of the crazy stuff that's going on in the back of my head. But I think this is a great model. And I think that on the industrial side, I would be willing to share with you some of the things that's turning my hair gray lately.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And yeah, we would be super interested in hearing about that, because it is an area we've not been so deeply involved in so far. I will say, so basically you'll be able to include 2 different rates of leasing within each build that are non-residential. So 2 different types of commercial, and we have included parking, but we haven't gone into detail on access, and we don't have a lot of experience with train lines. So we'd definitely be interested in following up with you on that as well.
And Peggy, I'm going to put my contact info in the chat, and feel free to send us an email. We'd love to hop on the phone and talk through, what those different structures are, and how, in round 2 of the model, we can kind of build some of that in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Simply click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll unmute you to talk. We don't have any at this time. Ivana, Colin, were there any other topics that you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
I think, the only thing I will say is, we're going to be live in a few weeks. If you'd like early access, please sign up at groundupmodel.org/launch. The link is in the chat. If you have questions, if you want to set up time to talk, feel free to send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear how you're thinking about, how this will be useful for you. Areas where we can be going with this. If you have communities, if you know colleagues or other people in your region who could really benefit from this tool, our metric of success for this is really getting it in as many hands as possible, right? This tool will only be as good as the amount of users on it and the amount of feedback we're getting from it. So please, 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 we're sort of in this process of pounding the pavement of talking to everyone. We know everyone who will listen, and then some to try and get it out the door. So if you know of anyone, we would love to talk with them as well. And thank you so much for taking the time and for going through this today. And thank you, Rob, for setting this up.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this today. I think it will be extremely helpful for several of our communities around the state. I did have one follow-up question. Each one of our participants today is connected to a deeper network within their communities. And I know that you're doing demonstrations around the country for this project. Would it be possible for other people who may not have been aware about today's demonstration to hop on another presentation somewhere else that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Before, I'm sure our friends in like New Mexico and Minnesota will not be too offended if all of a sudden a bunch of folks from Maine start showing up. We would absolutely love it, and if just send us a note if you're interested in doing that, so we can flag to people beforehand. But yes, please. We spend a lot of time doing demos of this, and so if people missed this one that you think would benefit from it, we would love to just have them hop on a different webinar we're doing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This is an exciting project. I'm glad that you approached us to introduce it to us. I think it'll be highly used once it's finally launched, and it's a great opener to get a lot of buildings done. So thank you very much for your time, and we will be in touch with all the links that you left. This is recorded, and I'll be releasing it to all of our participants once it is edited. And thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the work you do at MDF.
You bet. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.